Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Summer. We're doing a tutorial of sorts today. I'm going to be showing you guys two different foil looks, benefits of each one, and how to guide your client on which one to go with, so let's get to it. All right, I am excited. I am going to be doing, on this lovely mannequin here, two foil options. One side of the head, I'm going to be applying traditional style highlights that are not too thick or thin, and on the other side, a Babylight foil, so very thin highlights all throughout that side. With both styles, I'm going to also be doing a mix of weaves and slices and a fairly heavy foil application, so a decent amount of foils on each side. So I have already got her sectioned off. Because I'm doing two looks, I've just split the hair right down the middle of the head. I've made two mini mohawk sections for the tops. This would be for wherever your client parts their hair. A front side section on each side of the head, and then we have our two back sections. I'm using Moroccan Oil's Blonde Voyage lightener, and I'm starting off with 5 volume, and it's time to get foiling. So I'm gonna start right here in the back, and I'm going to be doing a diagonal back. I like doing that along the back hairline because that way when the client pulls their hair back, this flows more naturally rather than if you're just going straight horizontally up, it creates kind of those harder lines. So this helps it blend in a little bit better. And actually, I'm just gonna clip this into two sections. It'll make it easier to move through it. So I'm gonna take my diagonal back, or however the hairline kind of falls with your client, adjust it to how their hairline naturally lays. And then again, this side I'm doing my traditional foil, so I'm just gonna kind of be doing normal weaves, nothing too thick, nothing too crazy. The point of this video is to really kind of just show you guys the difference between the two looks. And then I'm gonna be talking while going through about how to tell who's the right candidate for what look, you know, why somebody might want a Babylight over a traditional and vice versa. I'm so excited to be foiling this mannequin. I bought new mannequins. I normally buy them on Amazon and they have been great, but the hairlines are so thick. If you've watched any of my other videos for foiling, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is a pivot point mannequin and the hairlines are so much more accurate to what real clients are like. So I'm not sitting here having to like curse to myself how hard it is to foil the hairline. So normally what I do with the back area of my foils, I usually do about 2 to 3 diagonal backs or at the angle of their hairline in the back, and then I'll switch my position. You don't have to go at an angle all the way up, but I do like to do it right on the hairline just to keep that soft for when they pull their hair back. Okay, so I've got those two in, and now I'm just gonna move into more of a standard, not straight horizontal, a little bit of an angle still, but not quite as severe. So I'm gonna be leaving, I guess about, I'd say a ½ inch, quarter inch to ½ inch between each foil. And like I said, I'm gonna be doing a mix of weaves and slices. I like to do a mix of both on clients. I just think it kind of gives a little bit more dimension and sort of, not texture per se, because texture is more feeling, but it gives a little bit more pop throughout the hair that way, just because naturally some pieces of people's hair get lightened up thicker by the sun and whatnot. So I do like to do a mix of the both. So traditional foil versus a Babylight, what you're gonna see with the traditional highlight, it's gonna be, compared to a Babylight, it's gonna be thicker pieces of lighter or darker, whichever you're doing in your foil. Traditional foils, I like them. They give enough amount of color and lightness to the hair without being too overwhelming. I mean, if you wanna pack in the foils really tight, you're getting a little bit more coverage with a traditional foil than you would with a Babylight. I think traditional foils are probably ideal for anybody who says that they wanna see pops of brightness. They want it to look like they've had their hair highlighted and colored, where a Babylight is gonna be a much more softer, subtle look that you guys will see the difference between the two by the end. And then the way that I fold my foils, I talk about this in all my highlighting videos. I take the tail of my comb, I put it behind my foil, so not in front, behind my foil, and I fold that foil over the comb. So you're folding the foil away from you, lift the hair and pop that in. The reason I do that is so that way if you get any bit of slipping in your foils, moving foil to foil or section to section, you can go back in and open that foil back up and slide the top of the foil back into place so you don't get a bleed line. It's easier to move it up rather than moving it. It's easier to relock your foil into place, pushing that foil back away from you rather than forward. So I'll show you guys. I fold up, I lift the foil, tail of the comb, and just secure that into place. And then of course I always lock in on my sides. So because as I'm moving up the head, this is getting pretty wide, it would be a little tighter of a fit for my foil than I would prefer. So I'm just gonna split it in half. I'm doing that just because, like I said, I could probably fit the foil across this whole section, but there wouldn't be much wiggle room out to the corners. So anytime you feel like your section's getting too wide, all you have to do is just split it in half and go ahead and do your foils. That way it gives you a little bit more wiggle room, and depending on the lightener that you use, if it swells at all, you have a little bit more space between where the hair stops and the foil to prevent it from spilling out at the sides. So if you guys are wondering why I started off with a 5 volume, that's about as low as you can go. I'm doing that because the foils here on this right side of the head are going to be sitting in quite a bit of time longer because I do have to foil this left side still separately. So I like to go low and slow. The 5 volume will lift a lot more than you think. It's especially good to go low and slow if you're slower at your application. So let's say even if you're not doing a full foil, but you're newer or you're just, some people just foil slow and you're doing a regular partial. Start off with a lower volume and work your way up as you move through the head. The worst thing you can do is start off with like a 20 or 30 in the back and then you've got all the front to do. It just ends up putting a little bit more stress on the hair than needed. You can obviously stop and rinse if you need to, but I just like kind of the insurance policy of a low and slow. So with my traditional foils, as I like to call them, I would say I tend to take about 50% of the section that I'm weaving or slicing, and that's what I slice and weave into the foil. That's kind of what I use as my guideline. Obviously, the thicker the section is, the thicker your weave or slice will be, and the thinner it is, the thinner it will be. But I find that staying kind of in that 50% mark of the amount of hair you put in your foil is usually pretty on par with the traditional foil look. And when I say traditional foils, I mean like you're not doing any of the root tapping, you're not doing the TEASY lights. It's just like your standard partial foil, full foil, somebody who I'm gonna say is like pretty easy with their hair is usually okay with a traditional foil. I feel like when you're getting into those TEASY lights, even the Babylights, balayage, that's a little bit more involved of a service over just your standard traditional foiling. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys and you know what I'm talking about. If not, ask in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer. Okay, so we've got this piece here. I'll show you a little bit of what I mean about the 50%. So I broke this into a weave that's literally about half the amount of hair. So hopefully visually that is translating. And then as with any foil, you want to make sure that you're fully saturating the hair, really coating it well. That way you're going to get nice, even lift everywhere. When you don't saturate the hair, that's how you sometimes wind up with spots. And then you'll go to check your foil and you're like, crap, it's lifting better in this one area, and you'll want to re-hit it. Or, I mean, that all also depends on what's going on with the client as far as what they have and haven't done to their hair. But saturate, saturate, saturate. All right, and then we're just gonna take this last piece here for the top section, and then we'll be moving into the side. Okay, so now that we have her whole back done, we're moving into the side. And the sides I do just do at a diagonal, kind of all the way back. So we're gonna go right along the hairline. And we'll just be at the same angle all the way through the top. And I do always like to do a weave right along the hairline. I don't like to do a slice. I just find that the weave keeps it a little bit more soft. And again, try to stay in about that 50% mark for your traditional foils of how much hair you grab in your weave or slice. This mannequin's hairline really is so much better. I normally am cursing myself at this point, but this is such an easier application on the hairline than the Amazon mannequins I've been using. So if you're curious on any of my other foiling videos, if you are newer to my channel, I'm gonna link all of the ones that I have done in the description below. I've got like how I do a full foil application with the way that I lock in my foils. I've got a Babylight, CHUNKYLIGHT. So I'll link all those below. I touch a little bit more too on application methods in those videos than I am here, because this is a little bit more so for the difference in the look rather than how I'm applying. So feel free to check those out if you haven't already. All right, and now we're gonna move into the top mohawk section. So I'm calling it a mohawk because I'm applying it in a mohawk pattern. I like a traditional mohawk. That's what I always do. I don't really, I mean, I'll foil differently depending on what the client is wanting, but I always just find a traditional mohawk, it gets the job done. I typically would start in the back, but just because it's gonna be easier for me, I'm gonna start in the front. Okay, so I am on this last section of my traditional foil, the mohawk, and I'm just gonna continue doing a pattern of weaves and slices, and I'm just gonna do that all the way up to the last little bit of this hair, and then we'll move into the Babylight. Okay, so we are moving into the Babylight. So I still like to do the first foils right along the hairline. So take it however the client's hairline is falling, so that way when it's pulled back, you see it. And we're taking smaller sections for your foil. So we're gonna come in real close to that hairline. Clip the other hair out of the way. And I'm actually gonna make it just a tiny, tiny bit thinner. So the main difference, obviously a traditional highlight is gonna be thicker than a Babylight. A Babylight is going to be very, very thin. You want it to be see-through. So you're gonna take the tail of your comb and hold it up nice and close to that root, because that's gonna allow for the most control. And you wanna go a lot slower to grab your weave. Come in, I fold my foils in all the same exact way and apply my lightener. And we're gonna come in and do another one following that hairline. You want to pull the hair pretty tight too, so that way you get the most control. Bring that comb up high again to the root line and take your weave. All right, and now that we have those two in along the hairline, I'm going to move just into like a regular horizontal. So one of the biggest differences in a Babylight versus like a traditional weave, you want to have a lot more control with your wrist. So you want your wrist to stay more so stiff, so that way you can really focus in on how much hair you're grabbing. Rather than traditional, you can be a little bit more loose with it because you're not worried about being quite as precise. And then a Babylight is by far much more tedious than your traditional foil or even a chunky foil, because you're having to really take the time to keep that control in the amount of hair you're placing in the foil. So it's much more tedious, a lot more work, and they definitely need to be at a higher price point than a regular foil. Again, pull that hair nice and tight. Your client's gonna feel a little bit of a pull with their scalp. And you really want the Babylights to be very thin and see-through like, not as much hair in it at all compared to a traditional foil. And then if you're slicing, you still wanna hold that hair tight and just go right along the very top of your section, so that way it stays nice and thin. So you can do the method of a Babylight and still do like a ton of foils. I often, maybe not quite as thin as this is, but I often, when doing somebody who wants like a super heavy foil, and let's say their hair is pretty dark and stubborn, I find that doing smaller sections of hair in the foil gets you a little bit better lift for people who are stubborn. So while I would still do it a little thicker than the amount I'm doing here in the foil, it is a good way if you're really packing them in and on top of each other, like back to back, to get really good control of the level of lift for your client. So I do often do thinner foils back to back heavy, on clients that I know are gonna be really stubborn or difficult to lift. But you would obviously be doing them, like I said, back to back, so you're creating more brighter pieces and getting more coverage. But in this case, I'm still doing a good amount, but none of them are gonna be back to back. And again, I am splitting this whiter section into 2 foils just so I get really good control of how much hair is in the foil. Do that if you need to, so that way you're not kind of overstuffing your foil with hair. So the Babylight I'm doing for this tutorial or application style, it would be an ideal method to do on anybody who wants a very low maintenance look. They want more so like a sprinkling of highlights where it just looks really, really light and sun-kissed. The grow out is gonna be easier than from a traditional foil. It's ideal for clients also who want very low maintenance. Because they are such thin pieces, you're not gonna notice quite the level of harshness as they grow out from the root. If you were to do like a much heavier, let's say Babylight application, you're still gonna get good coverage, but I still do feel like even though let's say you have more lightness everywhere, the grow out is still a little less just because at that root, it's not quite as much, I don't wanna say like of a line or stripey because I don't find the traditional foil to be stripey, but compared to how thin these Babylights are, they do look good. Babylights are also great for like first time color clients, let's say who's never had a highlight ever. They're a really good way to break them into it, especially if they're nervous about doing it. So it all just depends on what the client wants, but typically they're great for people who want low maintenance, a very light amount of highlights to just kind of look like an all over sun-kissed look versus your traditional foil. And then another thing I want to point out with the Babylight, where with a traditional foil, I was kind of trying to make the amount of hair in the foils about 50%, give or take. A Babylight, you're leaving out much less hair from the foil. So this is about, you know, 1/4 of an inch, let's say, this section. I'm probably leaving out about 70–80% of the hair, I would say. So you're putting a lot less hair in the foil of each subsection, creating that nice thin highlight. Even this is a little thicker than it needs to be. And we're at this last foil here on the very last top section in the back, and I'm weaving because I always like to end with a weave. Okay, and now that we have the back done, we're gonna move into the sides. Okay, so we're coming into the side and I'm gonna do diagonal back or along the hairline, however, same as that with the traditional highlight. So we're gonna come in nice and close to the scalp, or the hairline, not the scalp, but close to the scalp as well. Clip that hair back. Again, pull that hair nice and tight. Keep your wrist firm and stiff, and then take your weave. You can also too, if you want with a Babylight, because it's softer, you can always directly weave right along the hairline if you're wanting to create a little bit more of a pop. Again, that all depends on what your client wants, but I'll do it that way so you can see it. Again, because it's a Babylight, you don't have a ton of hair. in the weave so it stays soft. If you wanted to make that more bold for them, you could simply do a couple back to back with no space in between, but for this purpose, I'm still gonna leave hair out in between just so you can see. We're gonna come in, take our next section. And like I said, with a Babylight in my subsections, there's more hair left out than there is in the foil. So Babylights, like I said, they're very low maintenance. Like I have a client, we actually did her Babylights last May, and she's very, very low maintenance. She had never colored her hair before, ever. No color, no highlights, nothing. She was in her 50s, so she was very, very nervous. And we just did really soft Babylights, a partial, and it's held up great. It looks just like very subtle, soft, sun-kissed pieces throughout her hair. And so she's actually coming in next month for me to do them again for her. But yeah, it's been a whole year. And because I didn't do a lot of them, you know, I didn't pack in quite as many as I'm doing today, but they just grow out so nice with her hair, and it just looks nice and sun-kissed. Part of the sun-kissed too is you wanna make sure you're not lifting them more than like 2 levels lighter. If they get lighter than that, you wanna tone them down. But with Babylights, I like to kind of stay within that 2 levels of lightness. So if they're a level 6 naturally, I like to keep them at a level 8. If they're a level 7, I like to keep them at a level 9. I just feel like that blends in the best for regrowth, and it looks more natural that way too. Okay, so I did mix up a little bit more lightener, and I switched to 20 volume. So the whole traditional foil side has 5 volume everywhere. This back section in the beginning of this has 10 volume, and now we've bumped up to 20 to finish out this last little bit. So everything should lift nice and evenly and kind of all on time with each other. Okay, so I'm done with her side here, and then I'm just gonna finish this last top section. Again, we're Babylighting this, so nice small weaves and slices. And then I'm gonna try to smush this out of the way. Then I'm gonna do this front hairline piece with the weave on the top part rather than underneath how we did the side, so that way we'll see if it shows a difference or not. So if it does, you guys will see it. So we're gonna do the weave on the top versus on the bottom. Okay, so as I'm finishing out this top last mohawk section, I want to remind you guys, Babylights are a great option for people who want a little bit lower maintenance, a softer look. The grow out is better on a Babylight than your traditional foils, but a traditional highlight is great for people who want to see a little bit more of a bolder look without it being too overwhelming. And then Babylights are much more tedious work, and they need to be at a higher price point. So definitely be charging more for them versus your standard highlight. I probably prefer doing a traditional foil, honestly, in salon. It's a little less work on my wrist and you breeze through them a little bit faster, but it is nice to do a Babylight here and there, keep things, you know, from getting too repetitive. If somebody has a ton of hair and wants a Babylight though, I will say that is probably my least favorite thing to do on somebody with mega thick hair is a Babylight. You want to talk about being there all day long. And then again, there is going to be more hair left out of the foil than in the foil with the Babylight. I know I have said that already, but I just want to reiterate that to you guys. So we just have this last little bit of hair left to finish in this very top mohawk section, and then I'm going to let her process. I'll show you guys what some of the foils look like before I rinse them, and I will get her glazed and styled. We're just going to continue in the same foil pattern of mixing weaves and a little bit of slicing. And again, less hair in the foil than what is left out of your subsection. We're going to fit just one last little foil in. This is the last piece, and then I'm going to count out how many I have in the whole head. Okay, so we've got all of the foils in. She's got 81 foils in her head total, with a little bit more on each section of the Babylight side, maybe like 1 to 2 more each section. But yeah, so I'm gonna let her process for a little bit, and then before I rinse, I will show you guys what the top 2 of the back and the front look like before rinsing. Okay, so she is ready to rinse, but I want to show you guys, this was the 5 volume for her traditional foil, and this is a 10 volume of the Babylight. So they both lift very, very close in lightness. I did apply a little bit of heat to this side to get it to catch up, but very even and very close in color. So 5 volume for the win. And then I'll show you guys the very top one. This is the traditional. This is still a 5 volume, might have been a 10 at that point. And then this is the 20 volume Babylight. So I'm gonna get her rinsed, glazed, and then I will come back to show you what it looks like all styled. Okay, so here we have our finished look. I love how it came out for her glaze. I did 1 ounce of Redken Shades EQ 9GC and ½ an ounce of 9WB, the cream shades. I love the cream shades, and those two paired together is one of my favorite. I wish more people liked the coppery golden tones. But as you can see here on my left side, we have the Babylights. It's a nice pop of color, but it's pretty subtle compared to the traditional. It's great for somebody who wants low maintenance with just a little bit of sprinkling. And like I said, you can apply more foils if you want it more all over. It's not going to be still quite as a pop compared to traditional, but it is a nice option for somebody who wants low maintenance. Maybe it's their first time color, but the color pattern of the Babylight came out really pretty. It's just enough contrast and sprinkling to give a little bit of brightness. And then the traditional foil placement gives a little bit more bold of a look. It's not too thick or too chunky looking on a client, but it definitely gives a little bit more brightness, and it encompasses more of the hair compared to a Babylight. So traditional foil is gonna be a great option for somebody who wants to see a little bit more bold of a look without being too much. They're okay with maintaining their hair a little bit more often, and the Babylight is gonna be your go-to for somebody who wants a very soft, subtle look and low maintenance. But they're both great applications to do in salon. I love the result of how they both came out. Babylight is more time consuming and tedious work, so you're gonna wanna upcharge for that, and make sure when you are applying your Babylight, you're gonna use a little bit more firm stiffness in your wrist when taking your slice or weave, where the traditional, you can be a little bit more relaxed with it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to leave a comment below, if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. And please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next week.